Hello, everyone. We are back from Norwalk and we are here for our regular Wednesday. Sorry we missed you last week. That was my bad. I didn't send the link. But there is some news is I think we might get Samuel on this show, Samuel Reynolds, who is obviously a race and astrology advocate and activist. And I've been trying to get him on the show for a while, but he's always very busy, which is, they say if you want something done right, ask the busiest person you know. So I would like Samuel to come on, even though he is busy. So that is in the works. And today we have Lillian Bennett back. She did such a great job the first time that we really wanted to have her back. So today we're going to tackle a topic that Ricky likes to talk about, but we haven't tackled on this show, which is gender in astrology. So in this show, we look at all things cultural and all the indicators that affect a chart other than the chart layer, and gender could be said to be one of those. So do we consider gender a cultural layer, or what do we all think there?
I love that question.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't consider it cultural, then we definitely can't ignore that gender means something different in different cultures. Um, so either way, it definitely touches culture.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought about it's not plants, but birds, like most parrots, for example, look the same. They're not differed by gender, but there are a lot of birds that are sexually dimorphic, which means they show different behaviors based on their sexual characteristics. And so I thought of it as a cluster of behaviors that were sexually dimorphic. And then I wrote down how we dress, how we bathe, how we live in private are all really different if you kind of poke around at folks who identify as a gender.
Yeah, I mean, we could start with the binary of gender. Now, and you bring up sex, and I feel like the first thing we need to just deconstruct is sex. Chromosomal sex isn't gender, according to most people. Like most queer theorists would say that gender is more of a performance, or it's the reading of, male, female on human bodies. Or how do we understand sex as different than gender or similar?
Well, I think the way I'm thinking about it is um, gender is what happens, I think, when sex and culture start to mix.
Ooh, I like that.
I agree. I agree. I think it's really juicy stuff. Like if it's not sexual, if it's not a component of sex, there's something really reminiscent about it. Like it's unavoidable that if you're incarnated, you are here to reproduce. And there is, all sorts of evidence about that. So I do think there's some like magnetized nugget around those, I would say, clusters of behaviors, right?
So, well, this is interesting. So we're talking about like sexuality, like the attraction to other people is part of gender in some ways. But then we're talking about biological sex, which is a different thing. But I love what you said there, Ricky. Let's say that again. So gender is when sex and culture mix. Okay, we could totally meme that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a nugget that all people could tolerate to have. Okay, so let's talk about biological sex, not the act of having sex. Okay, so
Right.
in
Thank you. Yeah.
which, I'm a fan of both. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not a fan of either.
I'm
No, not a
super a fan of both. And look, I'm like blushing for no reason. And the other thing is to disambiguate that, right? Like that we're X and Y, and then biologically we could be a raft of X's and no Y's, or like there's a whole variety chromosomally, which is why I kept going back to the act of reproduction. But it's fascinating, right? We start as the
Yeah.
same until a little bit into forming in a womb. So what's that all about?
Well, and people always think there's like XX and XY, but actually what, I majored in queer theory in college. So it's like I actually have learned a lot of what queer theory says. I think astrologers know more about gender than queer theorists, no offense and offense, but you know what I mean? It's like, sorry, not sorry. But the thing is there are X broken X people. There are XXYs. There's XYY people. I think Shaquille O'Neal is an XYY. But like, how often
Hmm.
do we really test our chromosomes? Like, we're not like, oh, I think I'm sick. Can you test my chromosomes? Like, hardly ever happens. So, but I think from Ptolemy's four influences on a growing creature, we can look at this. He says that there's that seed, that genetic layer. So this
Yeah.
sixth layer is the genetic layer of the plant that's growing, right? So I think there's an interaction between the genetic layer and the chart, right? So let's start there because then there's also that cultural layer, which is more maybe where we get that gender. According to Ricky, it's like sex is you're like gender is that cultural layer of sex. So let's talk about the genetic layer and the chart layer mixing. How is a chart, if we had the same chart and it's on an XX person or an XY person, what's Sims, what's different? Okay, let's say,
I'll chime in.
okay,
It
yeah.
feels like when I'm looking at the chart of someone, I can't disambiguate whether it's a male or a female. Do you know what I mean? Like I'll look at that chart and I think, oh, look at that. They have uh Sag air or fire Venus. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that starts happening in my brain. Maybe they should go find the pretty people. Maybe they should go, provide. Maybe there's something to that, right? And then the earth and the water feel more like, oh, remind those folks to magnetize, that their job is to be stunning and be observed, and where that falls in each person's chart, it increases exponentially with each planet, right? So I can't figure that out, but that's not to say there isn't a way.
What do you think, Ricky?
I don't know, I'm still thinking about it.
Okay, let's make
The
it more.
first,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, please.
Well, one
No,
thing I
go.
will
Please.
say is, since I've been thinking about it for years, is that male XY chromosome people have 30% more testosterone in the physical form biologically. So if you have a Sun-Mars conjunction on an XX form or a Sun-Mars conjunction on an XY form, I think they are different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was thinking. I was thinking more of um hormonal activity. And I think the unconscious or whatever you want to call it, as it's trying to express through the physical body, does exist in an environment that's flooded with hormones. So it's an environmental factor. I mean, an example is if you take someone who's got a lot of Mars in their chart and you put them around sharp objects, weapons, etc., you're going to get a certain expression of that Mars. If you take a Mars person and you put them in a debutante ball, you're going to get a different expression of that Mars. And so I think I think you put someone in a situation where there's a lot of testosterone running through the body, you're going to get one expression of Mars than if you didn't have that amount of testosterone pumping through the body.
Yeah, like it makes me think of like gangbangers. It's like there can be super fierce females in the gang. Like and those are girls like I don't know if you know Honey Cocaine, but her I don't know if you know her. She's like this rapper. I think she got shot actually, but she has a I think it's like a Mercury Mars Pluto conjunction in Scorpio and like she's a fierce, vicious verbal rapper. But like I mean I would make the controversial case that the toughest, scariest person in a gang is an XY person. Like if you took that Mercury, Mars, Pluto and you put it in on an XY form, I think it's scarier than even the most. I think you can have a female in a gang who's tougher than like a weak charted XY person. Like let's say you have an XY guy who's like a softie, he's like 30 planets in Cancer. He's like the bodyguard in the gang and he's like always crying and weeping. Like, okay, she's tougher than him. But if we took the same Sun Mars conjunction and we put it on an XX and an XY, I think the XY is tougher. What do you
It
guys?
is, I
Yeah.
find that so hard to gauge. You know what I mean? But I think I have a chip on my shoulder. I feel like I grew up with women like actual Amazons. And so, like, I didn't think guys were human until I noticed my brother used shampoo. And I was like, well, he's got to be human. You know what I mean? Because he's using shampoo. And all of them were, all of the, I could not, let's just say I couldn't process around them. You know what I mean? And then they were so terrible to women that I actually tried that shit, not to be terrible to women, but to be terrible to men, and see if I could take what I could get and that kind of thing. Until a friend of mine who had been stripping for like a year in Atlanta was like, you are going to lose your soul. And sure enough, I started dreaming. I was a cocktail waitress and started dreaming about, Johns and hooking and all of this stuff. And I was like, that's plenty, that's realistic enough for me. I'm going to back it up. And then I had this horrible experience, and this guy let me just cry with peace in his heart. And I was like, uh-oh, look how human, look how human these men are. Oh shit, now I've got a lot of backtracking to do because that's a different category of people. And so I find that I kind of have a bias towards assuming a woman will kill you just as quick as a man. It's just super different how they'll do it.
That's true. Maybe in XX. Well, the metal guys and I used to have these brutal fights over like who's stronger, who's scarier, because we were dealing with like domestic violence in the metal community.
Yeah.
And it was like we were always like, well, a mouse can kill an elephant, or like a poisonous snake is really small, but it can kill an elephant. Like, and also in Magic the Gathering, there's a lot of battle, and it's like between little animals and big animals, and like
Yes.
so. I mean, I think you could make the case that a small XX female could kill a huge XY male, but she would use different modalities, maybe. So, okay, you make a good case.
Yeah, and don't forget, I'm a man-sized woman. When I go into doctors and I say I need something done, and they say, no, you're too fat, I go, would you say that to a football player? Because I am so tired of hearing you don't have the tools and skills to take care of this body. It's not anything unusual. So I've had to kind of advocate for that. But in my travels, I was also going to say, because I heard one of the last discussions that you all had together with the person from England, I think. I don't
Mhm.
want to, the UK, I'll
Danielle?
say. Yeah. And you were talking about the differences between cultures of women. And I wanted to chime in because my background is Irish American, like um, I had Greek women apologizing to me for that because they were like, an Irish woman will let you beat on them forever. It is sad, and you need to get it together. And then I lived in Washington, D.C., and it was back in the 80s. And my roommate was a bassist for a band. Anyway, I loved him so much. His name was Fred Smith, and we were all government employees. It doesn't matter, but he and his girlfriend were Black, and she did that too. She was like, I am so sorry, you got like the worst socioeconomic approach to gender than anyone. And that was at the same time that I learned that they were, incarcerating Black men unfairly. And so Black women in particular, had to take on the role of the head of the household. And so, yeah, they had a lot more freedoms, but it was costly kind of deal. And all of the Black girls I grew up with, because it was right after segregation started, I never thought of it before, but every parent must have said, behave yourself, don't do anything wrong. Because every Black student I met outclassed us, was so smart, was really put together, was, like, don't talk to me about anything gross. They were really well behaved. So that was the vision that I saw. And I just wanted to chime in with that because it's wild how many different versions of reality, there are in genders.
Got anything to say,
Hmm.
Ricky? I feel like we're stuck.
Yeah. No, no, it's fine. The one thing that comes to mind, and this is gender culture, it's kind of all of it. But if we start with an idea,
Mhm.
an idea pops into my head. An idea pops into my head. Idea, we can make the assumption that if an idea pops into our head, at least from the idea's perspective, It would like to see action related to the idea.
Yes.
Right? And so I think of gender, right? Because if we're talking about you can look at a chart and you don't know whose gender it is, then you can look at an idea and you could say, I don't know what gender this idea is manifesting through.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
And thinking about if we start with just gender, right? We say someone XX, XY, whatever, right? And then we give a thought, and then we can imagine the thought arising in male. We can imagine the thought rising in a female, and to me, that proves the point that it's real. There's a real distinction. It's just from the point of manifestation of an idea into manifesting as behavior or an action, right? It's like the simple one, I'm going to kill this motherfucker, okay? Right? And right, if we're being honest, I think all of us have had that thought, you know?
Yeah.
But and I think when we have it, I mean, we're not all going to act on it to that extreme, but there is going to be some action in a direction of something that's not kind towards that person, towards that individual. And I think where we can see all the layers of conditioning, training that that thought has to filter through before it turns into some kind of activity or behavior.
I like that as like the vessel, the genetic vessel is like a filter through which the chart kind of, goes like, okay, so I'm gonna keep pushing this because this is like activism work, right? Where we kind of push the conceptual framework. Okay. So is the fastest person on Earth a male or female? XY or XX?
Female. I mean, it's a male. It's a male. Male.
I
Yeah.
think it's a male too. Absolutely.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I think, I mean, just as an activist,
But
I want to say that XY filter is more testosterone. Okay.
I do dig that. I fully dig that. Except, like, when I was investigating what's up with trans folks, like I had a right to, right? You know what I mean? I kept hearing about the journeys that would happen specifically for female to male transition, the flood of testosterone where they wanted to have sex with everyone they saw, how unprepared they were for that, how long it took them to go through puberty. You know what I mean? The all of the different changes, and then you see the different changes, like an oval face becomes square, and so that is what detaches those two for me. It doesn't mean I'm right, but it's sort of like, wow, so put a guy on estrogen and that guy's, a Kenyan runner, right? And then check in a year later and see how that running is happening when they can't hold on to muscle, right? And or not, I might have said testosterone, I meant estrogen. Anyway, you get the point.
But so you're saying it's more the
There's a
hormones,
weird
not
mix
the
right now.
chromosomes.
Say it again.
So you're kind of making the point that it's the hormones, not the chromosomes. Because like
I
female
think,
bodybuilders who go on steroids, that maybe they're more on like the XY filter there.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
I think it's a wild card
Well,
right
so,
now.
again, I think of what we have access to. And
Yeah,
I think of the charts inner, what the culture outer, and and again, am including gender as culture and as far as what we have access to. And so a woman who has a powerful Mars, in a lot of ways, whether that's culturally or biologically, without some assistance, doesn't have access to the same kinds of Mars experiences as
yeah,
a man would.
absolutely. I
Right? I mean,
100%.
even like right, and this is a funny one, but even like peeing standing up, it can
Yeah,
be done. But I'm talking, I'm talking about as a matter of ease of keeping your clothes dry.
everyone's tried it. Yeah, there's undeniable, and I wouldn't deny that. I'm just saying whoever's participating in those could vary. Like, and here's I guess a way of talking about it in a way that is like gender euphoria, right? Like my husband has Saturn and Cancer, and then he started to cook and to bake and to own the kitchen, right? Like he met this Italian guy who never let anybody in his kitchen, and he was like, I'm that guy. I'm that guy. And the way he nourishes the household, we are tolerant of it. And I kind of wanted to talk about tolerance a little because, you know, like machine tolerance, right? Like the torque allowance tells you the story of how much people can accept, right? And so right now the torque's all over the place in our culture, right? But we may not always have access to the means to change genders, and we may not always have access to beautiful people who accept. So I love talking about male and female as like that's the most familiar, you know. I read a book once about a dad, you know, who is a dad in a girl's life, and I put that book down because they said before the kid goes to school, the dad has contributed so much that without that you will have lost a lot. And I didn't have that dad, and I was like, oh shit, you know, I see it now. I see all the stuff that men put together, like fearlessness and challenge. And I've met women like that too, but you're right, men own that, you know what I mean? That physical excellence and drive and
So Ricky, you're
comfort.
making the point that that because like XY people, um, or people perceived as XY have a kind of access to certain things, like they can run against other XY people in the Olympics, and they can be on the football field in the NFL, and so you're saying there's certain experiences they're privy to, and that might be part of why their Mars expresses differently.
Yeah, and I would say similar if I was talking about the moon, is no matter how hard I try, and I've tried, I can't get milk to come out of my nipples.
I'm telling you, you take some hormones.
You're right. Okay, then we got the hormone
Yeah.
equation in here.
I'm kidding. I get that. I get it.
Well, I mean, there's certain experiences that I can there's certain nurturing experiences that I do not have access to.
Right. I get it. Feeding a baby, uh, uh, pushing a baby out, those kind of things.
Holding a baby growing inside of you, but just
Yeah.
even the feeling of my body generates something that keeps this baby alive
Yeah.
and healthy and happy. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, like a body that generates a nurturing substance. If that's not
Yeah.
nurture, if that's not nurturing,
That's
if
pretty
that's not lunar,
unstoppable.
then
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that.
Interesting. Like, I mean, we can, okay, I'm going to use a medical example. Like, if you have Mars in Cancer and you're breastfeeding, you might get thrush of the nipple. I mean, since we're going all biological, okay. Like, because that's the Mars line right there. And then if you're a male has Mars in Cancer and you're not breastfeeding, you're probably not going to get thrush of the nipple. I mean, that's an example of just a different expression of the same energy based on the experience that you're having per your gender or sex. So I think you're really onto
Yes.
something there, Ricky, of like part of it is the experience layer. And I'm making the point that part of it might be this
A
genetic
big part of it, a
bubble.
big part of it is the experience layer, especially the experiences that we can only have through the physical body. I think that's where it becomes most obvious.
Were you gonna say something, Lillian?
Oh, I'm looking through my notes. You know, I had this whole thing about how we perceive gender that started with this guy, Julian Jaynes, the breakdown of the bicameral brain. He couldn't find any sign of self-introspection in the Old Testament or the Iliad. And so there was a sense, and I'm going to read this out, that the ancient Greeks heard muses as the direct source of music and poetry. So they perceived their left and right brain as a receiver and a speaker, but they didn't think it was internal. They thought it was a god. And then there became a sense of introspection, and the linear development in the book, The Alphabet versus the Goddess, starts to tell a tale of linear thought favoring men and starts to kind of create this thing of, are we equal, or the power distribution. And so when I think about that kind of thing, that kind of development, we see the interior discussion as emotion now or vision. And so we pathologize it, right? Or we don't let that develop as much as the analytical part of our mind, or they're divided by gender. And that's what I find really fascinating. I find it equally fascinating when people don't fall in line with that, because I think that's really spicy and juicy. But I do think that there's something about women being more inclined to think towards intuition, or their patterning is more visual and maybe kinesthetic. Um, and I do think that there's a fascinating sense of like this longer discussion, right? We are literally XX in the utero until we become XY or XX. There's like a fork in the road. And then there's, just this fascinating question about how different it is that we think. So what's that book? He's not your best friend. No, he's not your girlfriend. This advice book for a woman saying like your husband doesn't want to hear a bunch of stuff. My husband will stop me, like in this conversation, he would have stopped me like 20 minutes ago. Hold on a second. I need the thesis. And I'm not mad about it. He listens to me all the time, but he's like, time out, no rambling. Tell me what you want.
Well, I heard three theses in there. Their first thesis was that women are more on the bicameral separation. The women are more on the intuition side or the right brain side, and the
Yeah.
XY people are more on the left brain side.
Mhm.
As an astrologer, I'm just thinking the chart layers on there too, because it really
Yeah.
depends on your chart. Like your husband having that super Cancer chart, like Cancer moon males are for sure on the right side of the brain. I mean, it's like I would say they're wired into the waters of the chest, which actually definitely make them feel things, you know, on that
Yeah,
right
he's
side
a
of the brain.
Saturn in Cancer.
Oh, okay.
His moon's in Capricorn.
Oh,
So
interesting.
he puts all that on me.
I don't know. What do you think? Do you think women are more intuitive, Ricky?
Um, I think it's access. I
I
think it's
agree.
I'd say biologically, um, there's more access, but that has to be activated by culture. And I would also put the chart layer on that a man who has got a lot of Cancer in his chart, a lot of Pisces in his chart, does have more access to intuition. But if it's not activated by the environment, he's not going to know he has access, or that access is going to come through the women in his life.
Well, okay, and it seems like we're talking all around the issue, but actually we're talking perfectly about the issue according to Ptolemy, because we're talking about the genetic layer. Like, is this because we're development theorists, right? So we're saying, like, is this person developing an XXXY or something that we think we know of? Okay, then what is the culture and climate layer? Well, it's like maybe they have from the cultural level they have access to these experiences, not these other experiences. They've had some children, making them that part of their culture is that they're a mother, and and then what is the chart layer? Like, I think that is the correct discussion around development, is to go into all these. And like when you were weaving them earlier, Lillian, when you were weaving in um like the race and gender, like you were talking about African American females acting a certain way, and then Irish females acting a certain way. That's actually that genetic, Irish is genetic and female would be kind of genetic, but then there's cultural layers to each of those. There's the culture of Irish people, and then there's the culture of being female. Like, and then we haven't even tapped into like two-spirited people or people who have multiple genders, or we haven't even unpacked that piece, right? We're just on the binary right now. And I think so we have a lot of work to do around just what that looks like as well. But does that make sense to all of us that it is the weaving of these things that really helps us look at a human's development in a very not high-minded, but thorough way, you know?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think you have to, because if you look at the opposite, let's say you're sitting in on someone who's going through therapy, right? Is that most therapists, I think that's changing now, don't have access to the chart layer. They only have access to the cultural layer, because or the experiential layer of what's coming from the person's mouth. They don't have that added deeper context of the chart. And I think because of it, they can't do as good a work. And I think an astrologer who's only looking at a chart and doesn't have the cultural layer of the person's experiences in the same way is going to be limited in how effective they can be as an astrologer.
That's so interesting. Do you think about the I studied EA with Laura Nalbandian, and one of
Mm-hmm.
the philosophies I recall is the herd mentality versus the soul level, and then the center is kind of individuation. Do you have a concept of that too with regard to gender?
That like the Leo
Yeah, I
Aquarius
think that.
accents? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I think that in evolutionary astrology they talk. I think what you're referring to is they talk about the evolutionary level of the individual,
Yeah, yeah.
and and I think that does apply to gender because I was I was watching a movie. It was like 1963, and
Mm,
the name of the movie was The Assassination Company or something like that.
mm.
And a woman, her name is Diana Rigg, a British actress, and her character in this movie was very feminist. You know, like you could tell she was pro uh, women's rights, and she and she had a line that she used in the movie multiple times, and she says, "I never touch spirited liquors. I never touch." And it's the way the British accent and the way she said it is so beautiful. And whenever the guys would try to um, turn her objectify her, you know, she would always have a comment. And one comment she said is, if we ever want sexual equality, women have to stop exploiting their physical appearance.
She's so beautiful, right?
You want to know
She's
Exactly.
what
like
I say when that
amazing.
happens, Ricky?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whenever guys sexualize me, I go, "Oh, doll time, doll
The
time,"
whole time.
and then I wrote a song called "Not Your Doll." It's really good. It's like,
Yeah.
chin.
Whose doll is it, right? That's whose doll is
That's right.
And then I like gifts that say doll prank
it?
where the dolls come alive and start talking. It's like, do you
Yeah.
want a
I
talking
love
doll?
that.
Oh.
But
And
that's an example where you have a man and a woman and they both have the thought of I want to conquer this,
Yes.
whatever this is.
Yeah.
That thought emerges, I want to conquer this, and that's a Mars thought. Pure man, woman, whatever. But
Yeah.
based on our training and our conditioning and our environment, what we're conquering is different, right? Football player, I'm conquering that outside linebacker trying to get to the quarterback, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but as a parent, right, I'm conquering right my child's sick, right, and that's like a battle. Right? The child's immune system is fighting the battle, but we're on their team, so we have to go into fighting, right? Because what I've noticed in football, the things we hear on a daily basis because we're in a Mars environment, you don't hear in a daily basis out in the world. But if someone is in a Mars experience out in the world, you will hear the same things you hear on a daily basis in a football environment. And I think of preparation. That's the biggest thing. If you see a woman that has a strong Mars, the way I tend to think of a chart, the natal chart, is it shows potential life altering events.
Mm.
Because we can say that the chart describes someone's personality, but that personality didn't just come out of nowhere. It manifested through meaningful life events. And so if a woman has a powerful Mars, I know that in the course of their life, they're going to have powerful Mars experiences. And the big question comes,
Mhm.
are they going to be prepared for them? Right? Have they had access to
Mm.
enough right, Mars training to be able to successfully conquer the Mars challenge that is for sure coming up in their lives?
Yeah.
making me think of like highly gendered territory. Like I feel like the football locker room is a highly gendered place, like where no females, taint the masculinity of that place. And so certain things come out, like your martial energy can be like you're slapping each other and you're like, making gross jokes or what, like whatever martial things happen in that environment, that's allowed. Like if it's, a super You think I've been in there? No, I'm just
Well,
kidding.
I'm just having flashes of things that happen in a locker room where we laugh. Where if a woman was there, she'd be horrified. Most
Right.
women would be like,
Exactly.
no, 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 like that's not okay. But for us, I would say amongst it's necessary for that type of expression. And like I think in this conversation, what if there were Venus moon situations where we put men in to have to exercise those to have those experiences around each other, and we do have it now, I think, in female sports where you take women and you put them in a
Yeah.
highly uh,
Oh,
masculine environment together, and I think we get new expressions of what it
yeah.
means to Mars, or new expressions of what it means to nurture, what it
And
means to moon. And I think that's the ideal, is that Mars isn't only for men. I thought about doing a workshop that said men have Venuses and women have penises, you know, meaning Mars, the glyph kind of looks like an erect penis.
that's nice. That's nice.
Man.
Yeah, I would say the first time I went to a WNBA game, I did cry a little bit because I got it. I got like the attachment and I wanted people to succeed. I saw the expertise. It was a big deal.
Well, it makes
Um,
me think of like hyper moon. Sorry, Rita.
yeah,
Okay, like hyper moon places like a daycare setting where it's like the hyper masculine male walks into the daycare setting and everyone's a little uncomfortable of just like we're just Moon Venus here, like we're just playing
Yeah,
with crayons and being really nice, and he's just like
so
punching someone
interesting.
else. Like you would never do that in a Moon Venus setting, right? Like so, I feel
Right.
like this gender, like certain if you have a certain chart, right, you want to honor which environments you put it into where it can
Yes.
act out its
yes.
chromosome plus chart layers without getting in trouble, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, when I was in the third grade, and I couldn't wait to get to the third grade, because as soon as we got to the third grade, we could be recess monitors, meaning
Mm.
we could take the kindergartners and the first graders out to recess. And strongest planet is the moon in Cancer, and I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait for that responsibility. And I applied for it and I got it. And I remember it probably wasn't the first day, but a couple of days in, I got so mad at one of the kids that I hurled a beanbag at him, you know? And that's when I realized I'm a nurturer, but there's a there's a certain, with that Mars in my chart, there's a certain level where certain situations that I really shouldn't be in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Like you can
Yeah.
nurture your football team, like you're cooking, bringing cookies to the football game.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's a
Yeah.
really good
That's really good.
example,
I mean,
That
I can
honestly.
get
actually is
fired
really
up and
good.
smack someone on the ass really hard and say, good job, and jump on them and give them a bear hug and
Exactly.
say, ah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love
Well,
that.
that's
The female equivalent of what I heard you talking about, Ricky. I had a friend who described getting ready for a holiday in Bangladesh. And so she first said if people are in hijabs in society, they're not at home. They're gorgeous, they're beautiful, they wear Parisian clothes, and that for festivals, the women would separate from the men and they would adorn each other. And it was this really exquisite thing. There was gold jewelry and there was henna and there were different fabrics to try. And there was an acceptance that, and I found this a lot. I can't remember who said it first, but that like men swap hierarchy and women demonstrate solidarity by only moving at the same pace, and that's to avoid jealousy or whatever. And I think that there's something really interesting about that. There's this pool, and you're right, you wouldn't hear, the way you're putting on eyeliner is bullshit. What the hell is
Yeah,
that? It
yeah,
would be much gentler.
Oh my
yeah.
God, that's why I think my son Square Mars doesn't really get along that well with females because like I'm not waiting for everyone to catch up. Like in the Mega Manifestation lecture, I have a slide that says get ready for threats of threats of narcissism and jealousy because like basically anytime you go mega manifesting like people are like you narcissist and they get all jealous of you and it's like my son Mars is not having this like wait for all the people to like toughen up. It's like so I think I that's actually a really good lesson. This show's not about me, but sometimes it hits home.
Yeah.
Where you're
I
like
learned
Well,
so much from
well,
these.
so Well, my advice, as you're saying that, my advice, I'm talking to a young lady who's got Mars square the sun. And my advice to them is when you meet a guy, if you're into guys, why one of the first things you say is, I'm not like the other girls. No, right. And as they say, what do you mean? And then it gives an invitation to lean into that I got a strong Mars and
Yeah.
it's gonna show up. And that's part of the way, right? That's why I'm not like the other women. That's the part of the way that I do women. Right. Like for me, the
That's
part of the
cool.
way that I do man it is very lunar. Right. When I am dating someone, and when we're asleep or waking up, I want to do cranial sacral on them, to help
Oh,
them fall asleep or
yeah.
to give them an extra 45 minutes in the morning of relaxation. It's
Hmm.
it's different.
Yeah, it's very good. For me, I'll say we just had our 24-year marriage anniversary last week, and I swear it's like I just met this guy. And it's because he keeps coming back and he's nothing like me. And he's definitely, a guy's guy. And yet the way we learn, like at first we weren't very good about caring for each other. If there was an injury, we'd be like, but both of us did it, and so we learned how to be like, hey, am I taking you right now? And then the same thing with like waiting for somebody to wake up versus like, I'm so excited to see you, let's go. And he's got Mars conjunct the sun in Scorpio, so there's a lot of energy, like, I want to get in you right now and stay inside of you.
Glad we haven't
It's
rated. I'm glad we pick
metaphor.
adult shows.
It's R-rated, right?
No, astrology is adult school. Let's be real. Like
Yeah.
anyone, like kids, get away from me.
Especially with Mars, right? Because my Mars has to go somewhere, you know? And
Yeah, I agree.
if you're with the man who has a strong Mars, you have to remind yourself that Mars has to go somewhere. And if it's not in you, it's going to be somewhere else.
He's about ready to do a bike ride from the C&O Canal in DC to Harper's Ferry in West Virginia. So I'll
Exactly.
be able to track him along the way, but that's his joy.
Well, and so
But
just
that's the thing. We can do it together. That's the part that I really want to kind of come away with, that the mix, no matter how many guys are in
Nice.
one person or women are in one person, the mix is like, let us do it as beautifully as we can because it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
well, I want to
Yeah.
circle back around to a point that was made,
Yeah.
which is that okay, sometimes we get the chart layer that doesn't that's kind of gendered opposite to the genetic or cultural layer, right? So it's like we get a Sun Mars female, Sun Mars XX person, or a Moon in Cancer conjunct Venus in Cancer male, right? And so it's like here we I think we should have you back, Lillian, to talk about like more like multi-genderism and like we haven't even tapped
Anytime. Yeah.
that but I think since we're kind of more on the straight hetero layer on this show, it's like, okay, so what do we do when we have a chart that is, a super Cancer male with Venus Moon conjunct in Cancer in the first house, and he's a straight male, it's like, do we give him language to tell the women in his life like I'm a softie, or like how do we help someone like that develop, or the female who's a Sun Mars female, like what how do we like Ricky offered some ideas, but
I think nicknames.
Ah,
Nicknames. I think they could be negative, but right on a football team, if the guy who's got the strong Venus, right, the nickname is he's the pretty boy, right, or some nickname related to that gives some expression and appreciation. And I think part of spiritual names, right, or totem
yeah.
names. I think this really was the point of recognizing there's something deeper in the person that needs expression that's not always going to be obvious by the external. So if we give a name, it allows expression. It allows expression of those energies. And I think if someone, right, if I see, I'm talking to a person who's a manager in a company or they have a big personality or a big 10th house. And I'd say the people that work for you, what's their nickname for you when you're not around? You know?
Ah.
And I would say ideally that nickname should match something in your chart. because not to hide it, but to lean into it and to know that's a big part of you. And it's right, it's going to be, even though people can't see it on the outside, it's going to be obvious to them if they're interacting with you on a daily basis. And if they don't have anywhere to put it, it's going to be uncomfortable for them. But a nickname, it gives an expression, gives a place to put it, a way to understand someone.
That's actually so poignant and beautiful because, we are multiple personalities, all of us. Like we have aspects of personality according to astrologers. Like you have 4 aspects in your chart. It's only one aspect of your personality that's like pretty boy, right? It's like you could be on a football team and be pretty boy, right? And so like I love that nickname to that aspect, but it allows you to be hanging with in the male culture, and then we acknowledge this energy that's in there, and that's actually amazing. Wow.
Yeah, because the pretty boy on the football team, when he's around his kids and other people, they're picking up more of the football. This is a football player, and they might miss the pretty boy part of it, you know. But when that same person is around football players, the pretty boy part, it jumps out because it doesn't fit. So I think that's the gift of nicknames. It allows parts of us that don't fit to be invited to the party.
And it also speaks to there's no particular mix. Some people would assume for men with female sort of cast signs or influence of Cancer or male identified people, etc., that they have to be in a diverse group of people in order to manifest that part of them. And it doesn't seem that that's the case at all. Like I think
Yeah,
about in the Navy, they have the golden shellback, right? You cross the date line, I think, and you're a shellback, and you cross the international date line in the equator and you're a golden shellback. And the whole ritual is a fashion show of guys dressed as women or trying to dress like women. And then there's a little ritual where they get the bean and they take a bean and put it in one guy's belly button. And it could be this like, I need Venus in some way, and there is nothing Venusian here. So we're going to create it amongst ourselves. So
Interesting. Well, and I think just building on what you're saying, Ricky, like I will often talk to a woman who has like a martial chart, and I'd be like, you're a tough chick. It's
yeah,
like, you could ride a motorcycle, you could be on the back of a motorcycle, you could be hanging at the strip club with the boys. Like you're a tough chick. Like it's different than being a like a standard female. Like, and so it's like when
right.
a lot of guys like tough chicks. I mean,
yeah. So what comes to mind is with that is you're a tough mom, because chick. But if we move into like nurturing and some woman right yelling at her kids all the time, Reese Witherspoon in Aries has a quote that we found. Right, if you're not yelling at kids, right, it means you're not spending enough time with them.
That's not gentle parenting.
Well, but I'm saying for an Aries though, that is though, right? To me,
Right. Right.
for me, Aries parenting, and I was raised by an Aries mom, is the kids know that their mom is an Aries and they act accordingly. If the mom is trying not to be an Aries and the kids are trying to respond to the mom not trying to be an Aries, nobody wins, right? If the kids are clear, right, don't cross that line, okay, everybody wins, okay?
Yeah.
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 Well, that's why we study the nature, right? And you have to be your own nature. This is true when you're being a teacher too, that you have to render yourself to your personality. Like if you're a bad boy, you have to be kind of the cool teacher or the bad boy teacher, or else the students don't trust you. They're not being themselves. It's like you have to be you as a parent. You can't be another parent, or the kids don't trust you because you're faking, basically, is a thing.
Yeah. I had a situation. I look at the fourth house as the father. And my oldest daughter, she's got Neptune. She got Neptune and the moon conjunct the south node in Uranus in the fourth. Yeah. And she called me up one day. She was upset with me. And she said, "You're so inconsistent as a father." You know? And I sent her a screenshot of her chart. And I was like, "I'm just doing my job." Oh, well, I'm making fun of both of us, but it actually worked. It worked.
Well,
I didn't get pulled into the like I'm supposed to be this, I'm supposed to be that. I was like, hey, like, we're both working on this stuff. Okay. You're working on being a daughter, I'm working on being a father. Look what we're working with. Let's help each other out.
Hmm.
Did you have follow-up conversations?
Well, yeah, she needed like 4 months off, and then 4 months later, she hit me up. Well, first she said, "I decided that I don't want you to be my dad," and looking at her 4th house, this is part of the process that she needs to go through. And I
Right.
said, "I get it." I said, "I totally get it." And 4 months later, she said, "I need some money, so I need you to be my dad." I said, "That's all I'm looking for. Just tell me exactly, give me the rule book of how to be a good dad, and I'll do my best to follow."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
all need a different thing. I mean, they really do. Some need space, some need this, some need that, some have
Yeah,
co
I don't have children, so I just marvel because that whole having to quadruple what you put out as an individual because you've got children has did not happen to me. So,
Ricky, we should do a show on the culture of being a parent and astrology. Like, how does it change
Oh,
you to be a parent and have a kid?
mm,
And
mm,
it'd be
mm,
a
mm.
chart, you know?
yeah,
Um,
that'd be fun. That'd be a fun conversation.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I know that these seem like fun conversations, but I'll tell you, I've been reading a lot about activism lately, and activism is a series of conversations. And I just want to impart that I think we are doing more activism than it looks like because, I was just at Norwalk and I didn't see any conversations about culture and astrology. I mean, no, I'm not saying there's anything wrong. Norwalk is beautiful and perfect just as it is.
Of
I'm just
course.
saying, you can survey that to see what is the conversation in astrology, and I think we are the target that things might be moving toward. I mean, we're kind of in some ways driving our boat forward, and it is a little activisty. We're making some reframes in the conversation.
Yeah.
So
Oh, good.
all right,
It
so we
feels
have
like it. Yeah.
2 minutes. Anything else? You want to know what my nickname is, Ricky? My son
Wait,
Mars
yeah, what's
nickname?
your nickname?
It's Andy Savage.
Mm.
I got my students gave me a Macho Man Randy Savage doll because I'm so
That's awesome.
My
My
because
nickname
sometimes
was
I go
Ricky.
crazy in class. What?
My nickname was Ricky. My nickname was Ricky Weirdo.
Ah, that is so you. That's so on brand for you. Do you have a nickname,
Yeah.
Lillian?
My husband calls me Tony the Enforcer.
Oh my God.
And I call him Glaucus, which means like a gray thing. And I do the shape of a vampire back to him.
Oh my God. Interesting. Well, I think we're 1 minute before the hour, but I think this is a good place to kind of wrap up. And I really do, Lillian, want to have you back to now go into the multi-gendered layer. I mean,
I'm
Ricky,
so curious about it and, always learning, always learning. But, before I saw a bunch of folks, how much they got changed by hormones and even detransitioner folks, I was like, it's all right there, isn't it? All these different dimensions we wouldn't think about. And it didn't occur to me how much that could change how you perceive everything,
yeah. Should I
you
have
know?
Thorn on that show with
I
us?
would love that. I
Okay,
would
I'll
love that.
bring Thorn and Lillian back for the multi-gendered and that cultural layer. So,
Yeah, yeah.
all right. All right,
Cool.
well, thank you
Thank
both.
you guys.
Have a wonderful.
Yep. You
Take
too.
care.
All right,
All
bye.
right.